over the last 2 weeks, I had to work quite long hours. You know, very early in at the office and then getting kicked out in the evening by the security guard when the building was closing. And it was not a particularly good time. You know, it wreaked absolute havoc on my normal day-to-day life, and it was really not a fun time. And it just made me think about kind of how my experiences changed around working long days. So I was always super against working like super long hours. You know, I got to 2 degrees and about like 5 years of studying without having to pull an all-nighter. The closest I got was starting an assignment at 9 p.m. and then finishing it at 2 a.m. And I just passed out and had it in the next morning and like put in the finishing touches early morning rather than staying up later. And part of that is true that I'm more an early bird. So when I had to cram work, I always got up like really early, like 4:30 in the morning, and then worked until like 8, 9, and then I could get on with my life. Even still, it was very rare for me to have to kind of like push myself that far and put that much work in. And, you know, I had people around me telling me that they were doing like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-hour study sessions and work sessions in university. And from what I saw, there were 2 main differences in how I worked versus how kind of my peers worked. 3, if you consider the fact that I might just be built different. Number 1 is that I got really, really, really good at paretoing my way through university, which was one of my most honed skills over my studies, was figuring out kind of what is the 20% of things I should put all of my effort into to get me 80% of the way there. I kind of developed this scalpel against a shotgun style of working when it came to doing assignments and requirements for courses. So I knew always exactly what are the requirements for a course, how an exam is going to look like. And when I was studying, and I always studied keeping the requirements in mind. I got a lot of shade for this from peers who were like, oh, but you should learn everything that the course has to offer, and you know, what about this part? Why are you not looking at theory when the exam is only practice? And like, there is a point to that. And you know, I had courses which I absolutely loved, and then I devoured everything about the exam. But if it was a course that I was a bit more lukewarm about, I just figured out like, okay, so if it's an only theory exam, there isn't a lot of point in spending all my time doing the practice tests on the practical side, because the exam is theory. So I just put together my little theory stash and I studied that, and then that was the 20% that got me a good enough grade on the course. So this was number 1, like paretoing my way through school. The second one is that I only worked when it actually got me anywhere. So one of the things I refused to do was, if my brain was just like, if the work stopped being productive in the terms that like, I don't know, I just couldn't focus anymore, or I got tired, or I got on something, I would just stop and take a break. This is kind of alien, because I feel like we romanticize this kind of self-flagellation of like, oh yeah, the grind, and you just have to sit through it and whatever, but it's just not productive, you know? If the question is whether you can actually like memorize the material or understand the material, whether I spend half an hour on it and then realize it's not working currently, and then go for a walk for an hour, and then come back, I'm much better off at the end of a study session than if I would spend 3 hours in there kind of trying to torture myself and my brain into submission. This is a principle that I completely stand by, that like sometimes work is just not clicking, and it's fine. And you are much better off if you take a break without the insane guilt that people put on themselves about taking a break, because you realize that this is going to be more productive in the long run. This is kind of like the 2 main things of like how I got through my degrees. Pareto everything, and then only work when it actually is productive. And you know, yes, of course, there will be edge cases where you will have to push yourself through something. You will have to finish writing some code or develop an assignment that even when you really don't feel like it. But largely, I try to avoid backing myself into corners like that by kind of giving myself enough leeway to allow myself to only work when my brain actually was cooperating. And I highly recommend this to everyone. But a PhD is something different. I think the main difference with the PhD is that the motivation is much more intrinsic. Like, yes, of course, when you take a degree, like a master or a bachelor degree, you still sign up for that degree and you're still interested in the courses they offer. But not every single course will be your main interest. You know, for me, it was always graphs and networks. I took every class in my bachelor that offered anything with graphs or networks in the name. I just took all of them because I loved them. And then there I went full ham. But other courses, you know, like there were just some topics that don't resonate. When you are a PhD, you are working on
your research.
And that research is something that you're interested in. Because of that, sometimes you just want to put in the extra hours. And this was very strange to me. So I had to develop the presentation for a company event. That's why I worked the long hours. And I fully happily spent 11 hours in the office working on that presentation because I was just super excited about it and I wanted to make it nice. You know, it had all the bells and whistles. Like I drew all my little titles and illustrations. It was a good time. And like, yes, it was a really long work day, but it was something that I inherently wanted to do. And like, I'm still very skeptical about working very long days and working weekends and not really taking any time off. Because like there is kind of like these two schools of how you look at a PhD. A lot of people look at it as if they are still students, which means that, you know, you are a bit more flexible with your time, no real working hours. You work over the weekends, like whenever you feel like it. And there are people who treat it a bit more like an office job, right? That you start at 9, you get through your work, and then, you know, it's probably not gonna be 5 if you're realistic. But like by 6 or 6:30, you are done with it, and then you don't work in the night or on weekends, and then you just try to constrain it to a bit more of an office schedule. I am still more in the second crowd. I just prefer having a bit of separation in my personal and professional life, but sometimes it's okay to kind of let go of that a bit and kind of give in to the momentum when you are really working on something. However, you have to make sure that this doesn't drag out too long, because while you can do short pushes when you work 50, 60, 70 hour weeks, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable for anyone. And if you can help it, you really should make sure that this is a temporary thing and then take the appropriate break afterwards. Because it might feel like that this is the thing that you need to do and oh my god, you're making so much progress. It might even feel exciting, like make all of that progress. But in the long run, you're gonna be better off because, you know, research and especially a PhD is much more of a marathon than a sprint. And if it's something that you don't want to do, I don't know, if you're always feels like you're super busy and always super caught up in stuff and it's not even your research that you're working on, I think it's very important to kind of like notice when that's the case and address it and figure out what is the core reason why you are working this much. Maybe you are participating in too many extracurriculars like councils, you know, like whatever, associations, everything. Maybe you're just doing too much. Or maybe you should have a conversation with your supervisors about like teaching load or you know, what have you. Just make sure that you actually take a look at what's going on when you feel like this. Now, my strategy for kind of keeping an eye on my time and making sure that like everything is on track is a newsletter I send to my supervisors. And I made a video about this because it's my favorite thing I do every week and I wish I started doing it day one of my PhD. So if you want to check it out, you can check it out here. And let me know what you think about working long hours and how you think about this. That's it for today. See you next time.